there. This is Renessa Boley Layne, and welcome to another conversation on how to create work you love, or how to create your perfect work. That's what we talk about. I am so excited with the woman that I get to share the internet with today, Dr. Dawn Graham. And what I love about Dawn, and what you're going to love about her as well, is that she is all about execution. So what exactly do you need to do to successfully make the switch into a career that you love? So we'll primarily be focusing on career switching in this conversation, but the things that Dawn talks about, they apply if you're starting a business, they apply if you're bringing a big idea to life. So if you're starting, thinking about any of that, tune in. So a little bit about Dawn and why I think she's so awesome. I'll give you all the formal bio stuff, and then I'm going to tell you what I really think about why she's so great, and we're going to welcome her. But Dr. Dawn Graham is a career switch coach. She's a TEDx speaker. She's a LinkedIn learning instructor. She's the host of a popular call-in radio show called Sirius XM Radio, Career Talk. She's also a regular contributor on Forbes.com. And probably the biggest is that she's a career director for the executive MBA program at the Wharton School of Business, which means that the woman is bad and she's doing great things and she knows what she is talking about. She's also the author of a book called Switchers, How Smart Professionals Change, How Smart Professionals Change Careers and Seize Success. And we're going to unveil all the goodies in that book all throughout our segment. But first, I wanted to welcome Dawn. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Ernest. I'm excited. That was a fantastic intro. You make me feel so good.
Good. So now I'm going to tell you what I really think. I really like her. So what I really love about Dawn's book is that it addresses the unique challenges and the job search kind of nuances that come with career switching, which is a little bit different than the traditional, let me just go and, find my next gig kind of thing. And she writes with the perspective of a former recruiter. So she's got that kind of insider knowledge. And she's also a psychologist. So she knows the behind the scenes kind of stuff. And she's going to give us the insider secrets so that we understand the psychology of what's happening on the other side of the table. And that's crucial. Like the questions that hiring managers are asking themselves about you, the subconscious connections and assumptions that they're making about you that they may not even realize that they're doing. And so the sad reality is that a lot of folks who step up and actually take that leap to change careers and really create something, that they love, oftentimes don't follow through and end up quitting. And it's not because you don't have what it takes to really do that thing that you're called to do. It's because you don't know the stuff that Dawn's about to teach, about the strategies and the knowledge that you need to have behind the scenes. So we are excited to have her, and we're about to dig in. So get your pen and paper handy, buckle up, buttercup as they call it, and take notes because she's really going to drop some gems. All right. So I guess my first question for you, Dawn, you say that the unconventional career move is actually easier to make now than it's ever been. And I know a lot of people would be like, you got to be kidding me, that there's no way, but tell me more about that.
So you're right. It's still hard and people are still struggling with it. And there's a number of reasons for that I know we'll dig into, but now we're in a place where people are switching careers more frequently. We're in a place where the norm is no longer retiring from a company where you begin. And actually 4.2 years is about the average tenure people spend in a job. We're at a time and place where we know computers are taking over certain jobs. So those jobs are going away and companies are working on reskilling people to be able to do different things. And we're in a time when employers are finally starting to realize that those so-called soft skills that they've talked about for so long, such as critical thinking, problem solving, influencing others, building relationships, are actually the core skills they need to be successful in the future. So all of these things are coming to light, which is perfect for a switcher. Plus, we've got all of these fantastic tools like LinkedIn and social media that make it fairly easy to connect and find people that we didn't have 2 decades ago. So the worlds are converging. We're not quite there yet, but we do have a little bit of ways to go, but we have some great tools to work with in the meantime.
Got it. Well, let me ask you this. Before we get into kind of the specifics of switchers, what motivated you to write the book? I mean, I've gotten a chance to kind of sift through it. And so I know I'm glad you wrote the book. And so I have all kinds of reasons why I think it was so needed in the marketplace. But what was the motivation for you? What did you see in the marketplace that was needed, or what gap did you think you were going to fill with the work that you're doing?
Yes. So what I saw in the marketplace is there's so many books out there, fantastic books about what is your passion? What do you want to do? What is your next move? But I didn't see a single book out there that said, now you want to make this major change in industry or function. How do you actually do it? And like you said in the introduction, I am a very practical person. I am here are the steps, here's what you need to do. And that's what Switchers really does, is it fills in that gap. Now that you know what you want to do, here's the practical steps from my time as a recruiter, from my experience as a career coach, and also from my background as a licensed psychologist, because what people may not realize is that psychology plays a huge role in the hiring process. And as much as I hate to say this, and I hope this is changing, the fact is hiring managers are often not trained to hire. They do it once or twice a year. Their day job is often not bringing people on and hiring them. So that makes a lot of sense, but it makes it really difficult for a job seeker, especially one who's trying to change, because the hiring manager doesn't really know how to assess those transferable skills, which means you as a job seeker have to do it for them. And so that's what the book really teaches you to do, is how to fill in that gap.
Yeah. And I love that, because one thing that I often share with people is that it's your responsibility to tell the market how to interpret your experience, right? And especially if you're looking to do something totally different, it's not their job, and nor are they going to spend the time to try to figure out how to connect the dots between something that looks totally different than what is their ideal blueprint, right? And so in order to get in the door and to have a conversation, you have to tell the market how they're supposed to interpret you. And so I'm glad that you say that, because it's really, really critical. And it's not just about, well, I've got this coding skill, or I have this or that. Like, that doesn't connect the dots in any way. So I'm glad that we're going to be able to kind of dig into that. So in your book, you talk about 4 general themes that drive what you call the empowered approach to switching careers. Like, you talk about responsibility, reality, risk, and resilience. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes. So it's funny. I wrote that part of the book after I finished the book. And in part because when my publisher read it, and when, my target market kind of read it and gave me feedback, they came back and said, Dawn, this isn't easy. This is hard. You're telling me exactly what to do, but I guess I thought it'd be easier. And I think that's a reality that I want to put out there. When you make a major career switch, we're still in a point in time where you have to do the majority of the work for the hiring manager. Like you said, rebrand yourself, build your network, and showcase what skills are going to be valuable to have an impact. And that is not something that many of us have been trained to do or do on a regular basis. So the reason I put that empowered approach in the beginning of the book was because I wanted people to know this is absolutely 100% possible. If you've got a dream, you can get there. That being said, you have to take responsibility. You have to be willing to take some risks. You have to understand that being resilient is a part of this. And if you don't kind of have that basic mindset, it's going to be really easy to write off all of these steps and say, this is too difficult, or I'm never going to get there. And here's the fact. I know a lot of people who want to make a switch who have not been successful. And it's not because they couldn't do the job. They would be fantastic at the job, but it's because they've not been taught how to make that job search process work for them. And that's what I really want this book to do. But that being said, that is up to you. No one's going to hand it to you.
Yeah. So then let's break them down kind of bit by bit, because there were some nuggets when I read in each one of them that I think would be really helpful as we get more into the tactics. So when you talk about responsibility, what exactly do you mean within the context of the career switch?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit similar to what we've been talking about already, Renessa, which is that, this is your job search. This is not a reactive process where you're going to go apply online. That's not going to work for you. If you're a non-traditional job seeker, you need a non-traditional process. And that means taking responsibility for the fact that you've got to do the work. You've got to build the network. You've got to recognize that not everything's going to be fair
Yeah.
in this process, and that stinks, but you might get ghosted. You might have somebody who requires you to do an incredible amount of work for the interview. And it's, these things are not fair. Maybe they're not rational or objective. All of these processes have bias and all of these other things, but you have to take the responsibility to say, I get that, but I'm going to find a way.
Yeah. And as it relates to responsibility, it's being willing to do the things that you are uncomfortable doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so for a lot of us, in order to step in, like we had a certain process or a certain kind of game plan, get your bachelor's degree, maybe get your master's degree, interview here. Like there was kind of this, there was a roadmap, I think, for a lot of us to that initial career maybe. And then when you're making a shift, it doesn't look clear. And so there is some responsibility to take for doing the stuff that's uncomfortable and different. What I loved when you talked about reality, and you just mentioned it here, is that it's not always fair. Like it is going to suck. And people should respond back to you, or they should do this, or they should do that, and they don't. And so what? Like, so what?
Yeah.
And the resilience piece, I think, is really, really critical as well, because it's not easy. And I think that it's par for the course for anything that you're trying to do. But it's knowing going in that I've got to have, I have to grow a pair, in a less than delicate way. And I've got to be willing to persevere. And I've got to be willing to just kind of show up over and over and over again until I get what I want. So there's certainly some mindset issues in there. But for you, being at the Wharton School of Business, you often coach the best of the best, right? And you're talking to bright people and people who are vying for very competitive opportunities. And you share this concept in your book called, how'd you say it, identity clinging, and why it is such a roadblock to really making a career switch and switching into a career that you love. Tell us more about that idea and why can it be so detrimental when people are trying to make a transition?
Yeah, our careers become such a key part of our identity, and especially in the US, where it's the first thing we usually talk about after our name, or the first thing people ask about. What do you do? Where do you work? What's your title? And so it becomes such an ingrained part of our identity that when you make a switch, you have to let go of some of the things that maybe are a huge part of that identity, because it's not going to fit where you're going. And rebranding is such a critical part. And rebranding might mean that your favorite accomplishments, the things you're most proud of in your background, aren't really going to be applicable to where you're going. And so I tell people always match first, stand out second, which might mean, hey, you've got a PhD and that's been great because you've been a chemist, but now you want to work in business, and now you need to, that's not what they want to hear. They're not looking for a PhD. They're looking for somebody who understands financial reporting, who understands data analytics, who understands economics and accounting and all these other business aspects. And so you have to kind of drop that. You can't lead with that. And I know it's worked for you, but now you kind of have to shift your identity to be the person that your hiring manager wants to see. And I'm not talking about being fake or making things up. I'm talking about the fact that you have transferable skills that you can use, and people don't feel really comfortable using those skills because that's not their strongest points. But if you're making that switch, you have to start with the strongest points for the person who is your audience, not for what you feel comfortable. So it's really putting yourself in this vulnerable position of saying, wow, I'm going to let go of those things that I've used as a safety blanket and that have gotten me this far in my career and make them secondary. And that's tough to do.
You also mentioned something related, and so the points might be similar, but somewhere you said, and I just had a note of it, and as you were talking, I was like, where is that point? But you said how your ego can be getting in the way of your dreams. Because I just happened to write it, so I don't even know what context I was reading it in. So I want you to put it into proper context, but tell us more about that, because again, to your point, people have earned those degrees. Like they've earned the degree, they've earned the master's, they've earned the three letters behind their name. And even if they haven't gotten advanced degrees, they've earned that title of director or whatever.
Right.
And we wear it like a badge of honor. But when you're talking about ego getting in the way of the dreams, how does that apply to what we're talking about here?
So there's a number of ways related to identity, but one of the things I talk about, a number of psychological processes that factor into the job search during the, during my radio show, during the writing the book. And the fact is that loss aversion is one that is central to the book. And loss aversion essentially is when you are, you feel the loss of something more greatly than the gain of something similar. So just an easy example would be if I lost $20 that I had in my pocket, I'm going to stew about that for days. But if I walk down the street and I found $20, I am probably going to be happy for about 5 minutes.
Right.
And I'm going to forget it and it's going to be in my pocket. And so this idea of loss aversion is that when people are very excited about making a switch and they think I found my passion, I found my dream, but realize that maybe I have to let go of the title I've earned, or the salary I've earned, or the weeks of vacation that I've earned, or having the corner office, because anytime you make a switch or a change, you're going to have things that improve, but also things you might have to kind of let go of. That's where the ego can really get in the way, because you say, well, I really want to do this, but I'm not willing to give up those things. Mm-hmm. And often those things are temporary. Often those things are not forever. Maybe you do have to take a step back in salary. Maybe you're not the boss anymore, but over time, those things will move back to where you were. And I think that's the part where I see a lot of people stepping away from switching because they don't want to take that step back to take 2 steps forward.
Yeah. It's really interesting because I think about it as being penny wise and pound foolish. Like there's this short term, to your point, loss. But truly, in that loss could be a 12-month step back. It could be an 18-month step back, but it catapults you so much further than you ever thought you could go. And it's funny, I was talking with a woman, this was years ago when I was doing research for writing my book, and I was just kind of chronicling her shift into kind of creating work that she loved. And it was very similar to the processes that you're talking about. And I remember her, when I quoted her in the book, and she was like, I had this new role, and, I was excited about this new role. She said, but I had a real problem. I used to be a director, and now I was at this company as an associate director, and I just really took issue with that, and she got over it, but it was real. And the fact that she was so tied to, but this is the title and this and that and the other, she could have really missed an opportunity that has set her up, like looking back, fast forward a few years, it set her up in a major way in the direction that she truly, wants to be in. And so for a lot of us, whether it's a money issue, like I'm a big proponent on get highly paid to do your work you love, like dream job and broke don't coincide in my life. However, there could be a circuitous route to getting there. And that doesn't mean that you're necessarily going from one role to the next higher role, but it does mean if you're strategic, and if you're willing to bide your time for a minute, designing with the end in mind, that you could totally rock it out in far better than where you were before. But then you tack on the fulfillment and the vitality and the passion and the meaning and the purpose and all that. That package right there is priceless. So I agree with you, and that makes total sense in the way that you've said it. I got all kinds of questions, Dawn, all kinds of questions. So you talk a little bit about the psychology of the job search. You started to bring that up a little bit. And obviously, from your experience, there's the psychology on the job seeker side. So for those of us who are looking to switch, but then there's the psychology on the hiring manager side. And one of the things you said, one of the comments in your book was hirers are human, which means that the hiring process is not objective. It's not necessarily scientific. So tell us more about the psychology of the job search from the perspective of the recruiter, the hiring manager, and those that are making that decision.
Yes, they're very impacted by loss aversion as well, meaning they know it's very costly to make a poor hire or to hire somebody who doesn't stay or doesn't do a good job. It's embarrassing to do that. So they're thinking with loss aversion in mind as well. And because of this, and because they're not necessarily trained in hiring, and certainly not trained in hiring switchers and looking at a lot of transferable skills, a hiring manager will likely go with a safe candidate. And when I say safe candidate, I mean somebody who ticks all of the boxes, has all of the matching keywords and experiences. And this is why a lot of people who apply online are weeded out, because, let's face it, applicant tracking systems, those systems that match people to jobs, are programmed by humans who are biased. And so you really need to get around that process and become the safe candidate in a different way if you're a switcher. And often that has to do with going through your network, because everybody who's a human hates ambiguity. And if you can reduce that ambiguity as a switcher by getting a referral or having somebody put in a good word for you, that is going to be a huge help to you to get past that bias. But what we know is that, there's all types of stereotypes. There's confirmation bias. There's in-group bias, meaning that, well, you haven't done this job before, which means you probably can't do it again. And, you're not one of us. And there's so many things going on that hiring managers aren't aware of. And the one cure that I could say that is going to really solve all of those is your network, because a strong referral into a company or a strong testimonial is going to convince a hiring manager to roll the dice on you when you don't have the exact experience they're used to seeing.
Got it. So let's dive in a little bit, not even a little bit, a lot of it, right? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of folks who are now listening and like, crap, well, where does that leave me? In part because many of us don't nurture our networks the way that we should. And so we come knocking on the door when we need something, but, the well is kind of dry because we've not made any deposits and so on, right? So let's talk a little bit about, what strategies need to be different for the switcher than for the traditional candidate, because you are very adamant all throughout the book that process looks different. And so let's break those pieces down. Like, if I'm switching careers and I'm trying to do something totally different, both out of industry, let's take the hardest case, which would be out of industry and out of function. So I'm doing it totally different, and I'm doing it for a completely different, going from corporate to nonprofit or whatever. Break down the steps that we need to take to approach this job search from a different place.
Yes. First, I would say you have to let go of traditional processes that you're used to, meaning if you're used to applying online, getting an interview, and having that be your process, this is going to be one of the worst strategies for a switcher because of what we just talked about. The applicant tracking system will weed you out. You're not even getting in front of them. And same with headhunters, any of these traditional things that you're used to seeing. And you have to go the non-traditional route. And that means rebranding. That's going to be one of the first things that's important, is rebranding to your what I call plan A. And your plan A is essentially your target, very well defined. So I see a lot of people, Renessa, come in and say, well, I want to change functions, but I'm industry agnostic. Well, here's the thing. Nobody who's worked in an industry for their entire career wants to hear you're industry agnostic. So you need to really clearly identify what your plan A is, what your target is, so that you can rebrand your skills to show how you can have an impact. And the fact is 90% of skills are transferable in one form or fashion. And what we know is hiring managers would be much more likely to hire somebody who is reliable, hungry, driven, than somebody who maybe has all of the keywords but is going to do average work. So that's kind of where you need to start. And then I know we talked about network, and that seems daunting when people hear that, because you're right. People are not making a habit of building a network, and that's something that can be corrected right now. And people usually have a bigger network than they imagine. One of the things that I talk about in my TEDx talk is how underutilized the people we already know are, meaning that our friends, families, neighbors, people we spend time with in the community, people who we hang out with, kickball or whatever we're doing out there, the parents of the kids, that, our kids in the soccer games, and all of these individuals who we know, trust, and who know and trust us and want to see us do well, chances are they don't know anything about your career other than maybe a title or maybe a company, or maybe that you go to work at 6 a.m. every morning because they see you leave your driveway. We are missing out on such a huge part of our network by not sharing specifically what we do, and more importantly, our goals. Because I can almost guarantee you, if you see your neighbor every morning when you walk your dog, that they have no idea what you do at work, much less what you want to do in your next career, because you probably talk about other things. So I think the step one, if you're feeling like you don't have a strong network, step one is just talking to the people you already know about what you want to do and what you currently do. And it's easy to just ask them first, say, hey, I know we've been standing watching our kids play soccer for a year, and I really have no idea what you actually do at your job. Can tell me? I'm interested. And the more times you share this, the more you're going to start to find these connections. Like, wow, I didn't know you were interested in that. My cousin works there, or my spouse works there, or I used to work there. And I think if you just make that your one change, you're going to see your network infinitely grow in such a short amount of time.
Got it. So, and this is interesting, because the urgency around, so when we're not thinking about career switching, when we're comfortable or complacent or whatever, this becomes something that's important but not urgent, and so therefore doesn't get done, right? Then the urgency comes because I'm not happy, I want to leave, or my company's making changes and I might be getting laid off, all kinds of reasons that make this now urgent. And in that sense of urgency, there's this feeling that I don't have time this is going to take forever. Like, I've got a whole soccer season with I don't have 6 months of the soccer season to try to build up this relationship, right? How do you deal with that when in your mind, because it's not urgent to anybody else, but when in your mind there is a sense of urgency, like, I really want to make this shift now, but I haven't invested in this network. How do I begin to have those conversations?
So I think step one is begin with the people you know, because chances are what I call your second level contacts, so people they know who maybe you don't know yet, will have a lot of impact on your job search. So if you talk to your neighbor about wanting to do a certain job, chances are they're going to say, oh, I should introduce you to, and bam, then you've got a new contact and perhaps a door into where you want to go. Another thing that people often underuse is their dormant contacts, which are those people who you used to have a deep relationship with, and now you have just lost touch. I mean, the great thing about tools like LinkedIn and social media is that we are continuously reconnecting, or able to reconnect with people we knew in previous lives, whether it was in a neighborhood we used to live in, whether it was in a job we used to work in, maybe it was in our university. I had a good friend of mine tell me that he's going to his 50th reunion, and he just met somebody who he literally hasn't seen for almost 50 years, and they reconnected. And so my point about telling that story is it's never too late. It's never too late. If you've lost touch with someone, reach out. Hey, it seems like you're doing great on LinkedIn. Came across your profile. Would love to chat. I mean, I think the bigger barrier is not that we don't already have a network, because we do. And that network has a network, and that's usually pretty easy to access. I think it's that we talk ourselves out of reaching out because we say, oh, they probably don't know someone. I mean, your dentist, if you're your dentist twice a year, think about how many people sit in that chair, or your hairdresser. Think about how many people sit in that chair and they speak with. And I mean, there's people everywhere who we can just pitch our goal to. We're probably going to have 2 or 3 names for us that they're happy to introduce us to, because we already have a relationship, or we used to have a relationship. And I think it's more us talking ourselves out of asking those questions, because you don't want to feel vulnerable. And I get that. Trust me, I'm an introvert. I get that. I do.
So and I'm harping on this point because I think there's a lot of meat to it. In part because, to your point, we do underestimate the value of who we know. And a lot of times we will judge whether we think somebody is, based on their title or where they work, or, whatever criteria we've created. And we don't know who they're the sister of, or the cousin of, or the godparent of. And I mean, I've gotten some big opportunities from folks who I would have never thought had the level of influence to really add value in that space. And one of the roles that I ended up getting that was a springboard to all the work that I do now came because somebody really random in my LinkedIn, like when I say random, meaning they don't even have a picture, they just have an avatar, like they're 28 contacts, like just not on the surface very valuable. But turns out that she was like the best friend of the VP's younger brother. And so she had known that VP for like 30 years. And she ended up just making an introduction, and I ended up getting a role that I did not have to compete with, did not have to interview, for. They just kind of brought me in to make sure I wasn't crazy. But beyond that, and it all became because of the childhood best friend of the VP's younger brother. And that was it. So I hear that point. I totally hear that point. Here's something that I'd love for listeners to be able to get help from you. There's an ego component that's associated with even asking for that help, right? It's not that the network isn't there. A lot of times it's we don't want to step up and seem vulnerable for whatever meaning we've given to needing the help. How can people reframe that such that they don't miss out on the opportunity? Because apparently for switchers, you're saying this is critical. Like you got to get on board with this, or else this whole strategy may not work for you. So how do you advise and coach and help people to reframe so that they're actually stepping in from a place of power in the midst of the vulnerability?
Yeah, and I'm going to even go so far to say it's not just critical for switchers. It's critical for entrepreneurs. It's critical for people who want to build their client base. It's critical for people who want access to 100% of the opportunities in the market, because what we know is that up to 80% of jobs are not advertised. So if your strategy for finding jobs is simply looking online, you're only getting access to a fraction of what is actually available. And let's face it, the coolest, most interesting, highest paid jobs are usually not what makes their way down to the online job ads, because they're getting filled through networks. And so I would encourage people to think about that fact when they're hesitant about networking. The other thing I would say, if you look at that plus the statistic that 4.2 years is the average, maybe right now is your time to ask for help. But chances are the people in your network, if you're talking about cycling through jobs every 4 years or so, are going to be coming back and asking you. So, I mean, it's that idea of offering that help to them as well, even if it can't be right now, doing that. And the other thing I would say is, I always tell my students, let's play this out. What would happen if you don't reach out? And the answer is always nothing. And so, okay, well, you've got two choices. You reach out and ask for help. And sure, maybe somebody's going to say no, maybe somebody's going to ignore you. But if you don't make that outreach, the answer is always no. So what do you have to lose? And I think often, when we really dig down, what we have to lose is, like I said, vulnerability, ego, worrying that somebody might not like us or might judge us, and so certainly how you do it is important, and you want to, do it diplomatically and graciously and invest in them first. And that's really key. When I say invest in them first, I will tell you this. If somebody reaches out to me on LinkedIn and says, I bought your book and I thought it was fantastic, I just read an Amazon review, wondering if I could have 15 minutes of your time. I mean, I'm putty in your hands. You just invested in me first. If somebody reaches out and says, just came across your profile, looks interesting, have some career questions, can we talk? I mean, well, wait a minute. Yeah, I mean, I put out tons of free content every week on my radio show, on Forbes and all this, but you've not invested in any of it. So I think if you're worried, one of the best things you could do is follow them on Twitter, read their articles, check out, if they have a course or a book or something out there that you can invest in, and then say, hey, I've looked at this, I have really, a couple of questions about it. That is the best strategy I have seen.
Yeah, awesome. And I think in addition and on top of all of that, there's a lot of power in vulnerability. There's a lot of power in asking for help. And oftentimes when I am reaching out to folks, people I know and people that I don't know so well, I'll lead with, hey, so-and-so, can I get your help with this? Because the reality is people like to help. They don't like to be used. They don't like to be manipulated, but they do when there's an opportunity, genuinely like to help. And so when you open the kimono in that way and say, hey, I could use your help with this. I'm thinking about redesigning my career, and I'm trying to make sure that I've got the right strategy. Would you be willing to have a conversation with me? Like, there's something about us that's like, oh my gosh, absolutely. What can I do? Who do I know? And so,
Yes.
as opposed to leading like, like we got it all together and, we were all buttoned up. Can I get your help with this? And you'd be surprised at the response that people have. Like, that's literally my subject line. Subject. Can I get your help with this? Question mark.
And I think what's important, Renessa, is to find something they're uniquely qualified to help you with, because I think that, again, it goes back to investing in them. But if you have a very specific ask and you've done your research and said, you know what, I'm reaching out to you, Renessa, because you have this, or you've done this, or your expertise is in this, so that people recognize that, you've really thought about why you want to, ask this person for help. That is so much better than, saying, hey, here's 20 companies, let me know if you know anyone, versus, Dawn, I see you've spent 5 years at this company. I'm wondering if, you still have any contacts there. It's a very specific ask. You've clearly looked at my profile, and, it's something that is easy for me to help you with.
Make it easy.
Make it easy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they want to. They really do.
I totally agree. So let's talk a little bit about what's great about these conversations, and what's great about talking to folks like Dawn, is that they're a wealth of resource, and they've got all kinds of amazing stuff, from their books to their radio show and all kinds of things. And so on this conversation and for this group, Dawn has so generously provided all of us a free gift that we're able to have access to with some of her amazing content. So I'm going to kind of turn it over to Dawn for you to talk a little bit about what you have to offer for listeners on this particular conversation, and how they can benefit from it.
Yeah, so I know you're going to put a link to a free audio chapter of the book Switchers, and I really would love for everybody to take a listen to this, because here's the deal. My honest belief is you can make a career switch, and yes, you do have to invest time. You probably will not be able to do it as quickly as you'd hoped, especially if you are concerned about salary issues and other things. You're going to have to work through those, but I promise you, I've made switches myself. I've worked with a lot of career switchers, not only here at Wharton, but through my radio show and through other channels. And if you do these steps, it is 100% possible. And I really want that for everybody. We're in a point in time, Renessa, that I truly believe we're all going to be switchers soon. We are all going to be, because of the economy, because of technology, because of the way jobs are morphing, new industries are emerging. There's more hybrid roles. There's more structures. We have portfolio careers, gigs. We're all going to be switchers at some point. And what I would love is for people to get ahead of it instead of being forced into it unexpectedly. And so that's why I wrote this book.
Awesome. And because we have a couple extra minutes, and I forgot, because we got all into step number 2, I want you to at least be able to outline the other steps, even if we don't take a deep dive. But I know the original question was, what steps do career switchers need to do differently than traditional job seekers, even though these totally apply to job seekers. And we talked, 1, about rebranding for your plan A. 2 was about leveraging your network. Are there any other steps beyond that? So then people at least can write down what they are, and then get the book and be able to kind of take a deeper dive into it.
I think that, one of the most important ones is keep the ball in your court. And I wrote an entire chapter called It's Not Fair, because I will tell you this, the job search process, whether you're a switcher or not, is not fair. It's not objective. It's not linear. It's not clean. And I think once you recognize this as a job seeker, you are so much more empowered, because you recognize you have to take control of this process and be proactive. So what I mean by that is, yes, you have to rebrand yourself, meaning you have to take your skills and put the ones that are going to be most meaningful to that hiring manager front and center. You have to go into the interview 100% prepared to leave on the table the information you want, regardless of the questions asked. And you may get asked silly questions that have no validity, no connection to anything, but you have to be ready to say, here's how I'm a fit. So this entire process is really in your hands. And what I would love is for every job seeker to be empowered, to feel empowered, ask the questions you need to understand if it's a good fit, prepare to deliver information that shows how you're a good candidate, and recognize that although this process, the hiring process, is broken, you don't have to necessarily follow the rules. You can create a process that works for you. And that's what I want people to know. And that's what this book helps people to do.
Got it. I love the idea of keeping the ball in your court, because that goes back to you really owning how you taking control of the meaning that the marketplace gives to your skill. And a simple way from a scripting, perspective for people who are listening to be able to do that, because again, you may not get asked the questions that you want to answer. Now,
You probably won't.
If you are really strategic in your resume and how you create your resume, oftentimes the resume can design the interview conversation if it's done well, but that doesn't always guarantee that you get asked those questions. And so sometimes you might have to say, hey, Phil, one thing that you may not know about me is, or one question that you didn't ask that I think might be very critical is. And so when going into those conversations, whether it is a meet and greet networking conversation, because sometimes we meet people and, we sit down for coffee and we spent 45 minutes and said nothing. And so the person walks away and they're not equipped to help us. They're not equipped to even think about who in their network or Rolodex. Now I'm dating myself with Rolodex, but they're not equipped to thinking about who they should connect you to, because we weren't strategic about what we said about ourselves. And so we'll talk, and there are other conversations where we'll have about, really how do you brand yourself, but it's about being aware of what are the top 2 or 3 things I want to walk away and make sure that people know about me. Not all 15, right? But what are the 3 core pillars of who I am and what I bring to the market? And then make sure that in every one of your conversations that you have been able to concisely and clearly communicate that when people walk away, they may know nothing else, but they know these 3 things, or they knew these 2 things. Because more is not necessarily better when you're trying to switch. Less is more, and being very, very targeted and being known for the thing that you want the market to know about you, even if that's not what you're doing right now. Right? And so how we introduce ourselves and what we say about ourselves, I don't need the history of you being the senior director at such and such if that's not part and parcel where you want to go moving forward. Let's do all that. And I think Dawn talks a lot about that in her book as well. Like, you got to talk about the stuff that's marketable now moving forward, not the stuff that puffs us up later. So there's a lot of great stuff here. And I'll close with a quote from the book. And I think it's attributed to you. I don't know if it's a quote of somebody else, but either way, it's awesome. And it said that a year from now, you will wish you had started today. And so that's so true. Like, if you're listening to this conversation, you're already thinking about these things, right? And the year is going to go by regardless.
Yes.
It's going to go by regardless. And the truth is, if you don't start now, you will wish more and more that you had started, before. And it may be baby steps, they may be giant leaps, but the passion is going to be in the progress, and the compound effect of taking one step over the other. And so my encouragement, get a copy of Dawn's book. Log in and tune in to it's what channel is it on Sirius? It's channel
132. Channel 132.
Channel 132. It's called Career Talk. She's got loads of really great content and is someone that's definitely worth following. And we're just blessed and excited that she chose to share her time with us. So we thank you for that, Dawn.
Thank you. No, this has been fantastic. And I love what you say about looking at the long game, because most of us, when you think about how much time you have left in your career, you have to think, do I want to spend it where I am, especially if I'm unhappy now and I have another decade or 2 to go? Or do I want to get on the ladder that I feel like I was meant to be on?
Yeah, it's true. And there's a great quote I don't know who said it, but it says that the days are long, but the years are short. And someone said that to me, more so about motherhood in that first year of having a baby, because it felt like the days were really long. But when we think about it from the career perspective as well, the days can feel long, but the years are really short. And when you step up and you just do things that you know to do, they may not be easy, but generally they're very simple. You'll be amazed at how fast things can change and how time moves and how far ahead you are as it relates to creating work that you love, doing meaningful work, putting things out in the marketplace, and getting paid a whole heck of a lot of money for it, whether it's your career or business. So with that, we'll sign off and wish everybody well. And thank you, Dawn, so much for sharing your time again. And we'll all
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.